Field of Promises Village isn't a poor town, but it's a town where everyone is accustomed to lacking things, lacking good roads, lacking answers, and lacking surprises. In the mornings, the adults stand chatting in front of the coffee shop. Complaints waft through the air, mingling with the scent of iced coffee. One adult, "The road's full of potholes again." Another replies, "Just like every year. Complaining won't change anything." For Taidy, an 8-year-old girl, sitting with her legs swinging, it's like listening to a recurring story. These complaints sound like the same old tale, but no one ever looks surprised, and no one ever thinks of changing the ending. When campaign posters were planted all over the field, the adults in almost every house said the same thing. Just vote. It doesn't matter who comes to power. Taidy looked up, puzzled, and asked, "If it's all the same, then why should we vote?" Her father chuckled softly, "Because if we don't vote, things will be harder later." And she received an answer that defied explanation. The little girl didn't understand, but she remembered the word hardship. She kept it silently in her heart. "It's tough. Does it really have to be like this?" The girl didn't understand everything yet, but she was beginning to realize that some towns weren't silent because there was no sound, but because everyone allowed fear to speak for them. And this was the beginning of a question that no one in the town dared to answer. One evening, a large pickup truck pulled up in the middle of the village. It didn't just bring someone. A portly man in a neatly pressed shirt stepped out. Children, "Uncle Sam is here." Another child, "So much candy." The children rushed forward. Candy was handed out as if it would never run out. Laughter was louder than ever. And that day, the village seemed brighter than ever. Uncle Sam bent down to talk to Taidy. "Are you a good student? If I become the leader, I'll build you a playground." "Really?" "Of course. I keep my word." The adults stood watching from a distance. Some smiled, some avoided eye contact. The promise sounded small, but in a child's heart, it resonated strongly. Taidy didn't know how much a playground cost. She only knew that it sounded like a special gift. The adults smiled at her in a special way. Taidy's mother accepted the bag and said thank you in a tone unlike her usual one. It wasn't a sound of joy, but the sound of someone who knew that something received must be repaid in some form, even if she didn't know when. "Thank you. Are you happy, Mom?" Election day arrived. The meeting room was packed. Everyone stood, walked, and followed the procedures in an orderly manner. So orderly that hardly anyone asked what they were doing or who they were doing it for. The officials spoke from a prepared document. Official, please line up in order. Villagers, yes, yes. Taidy sat waiting next to her mother and overheard a conversation no one intended for a child to hear. It wasn't shouting, but the sound of resignation, repeated until it sounded like a reason. One woman, "I don't really like him." Another replied, "But my family needs money right now." The first woman, "Me too. Thinking about it won't help." When the results were announced, the host said, "Let's give a round of applause to the winner." Applause erupted in unison. It was like a formality that had to be followed. Taidy clapped along, even though she didn't know whose victory it was and whose defeat it was. She just felt that today, the whole city had already chosen someone to make the decisions for them. 3 months passed and nothing had changed. The roads were still the same. Life was the same. The adults started ganging up to complain again. But every time someone spoke harshly, someone would quickly interrupt. One adult, "Don't talk so much, it'll cause problems." Another added, "He's just started, we have to give him time." The word patience was brought up, like a thin blanket covering up the responsibility. After school, Taidy saw her friend sitting and crying, not because she'd been scolded, but because she didn't have money for a new school uniform. Friend, Mom said I can't buy a new one yet. Taidy, it's okay, things will get better. The phrase, things will get better, was spoken automatically, even though no one knew if things would actually get better. She went home and asked her mother, "Didn't Uncle say he would help?" Her mother sighed. "Some words aren't spoken to act, but to keep us quiet." That night, Taidy couldn't sleep. She had just realized that some lies aren't shouted, but spoken in a kind voice, repeatedly until we stop questioning, and we call it patience. Taidy's school received a special project. A brightly colored vinyl banner was hung on the door. It read, "Developing Children for the Future of the Nation." On the first day of the project, adults from the district sat proudly in the front row. Teachers received thick stacks of documents. The children received new notebooks with the same logo as the old campaign banner. Everything seemed ready, except for the question that still lacked a voice. The speaker spoke with a confident tone. "A good child is one who knows how to obey. A country will be peaceful if everyone does their duty." Taidy raised her hand. "And what about the duty of those who make the wrong choices?" The entire room fell silent. The silence wasn't because the children were listening, but because there was no room for further questioning. The teacher quickly interrupted. "We'll discuss that question later." Lunchtime. The food improved. There was meat and fruit. The children smiled more easily. A friend whispered, "Since this project started, the food has been better, hasn't it?" But Taidy thought quietly, why did good deeds always come with conditions, and why was questioning them inappropriate? That evening, a new sign was put up. Not an election sign, but a sign announcing achievements. The same name, but in larger letters. "It's been raining continuously for several days. Part of the village is flooded. The relief truck was late, but the camera arrived first. Everyone was positioned to stand so that the sign would be in the frame. Uncle Sam pointed, telling everyone to stand in the right spot. Make sure the sign is clearly visible so I can report correctly." Taidy carried a heavy bag of supplies, items that should have been there a long time ago, but only arrived on the perfect day for a photograph. That night, the lights went out again. Mom took out some paper envelopes. Not just one envelope. Inside were the project names. There were signatures, there were numbers, but there was no word responsibility. Taidy asked, "What is this called?" Mom answered softly, "Cooperation fees." My mother said, "If we don't accept it, the school funding might disappear. If we don't sign, the water might not come. If we don't keep quiet, there might be no work left." Taidy felt like the whole town is being taught to choose between what's right and survival over and over again until no one remembers that we once had a different choice. A large village meeting was held. The topic was to hear the people's opinions. A microphone was set up in the middle of the room. But only a few people spoke, and everyone said similar things, as if reading from the same mind, even though the room was full of people. "Thank you to the leader for his sacrifice. Give him the opportunity to continue working. The problems have been accumulating for a long time." When it was time for the Q&A session, the chairman spoke first. "Keep the questions short, please. We're short on time." Taidy walked to the microphone. Her hand trembled, but her voice was clear. "If we make choices out of fear and tell children that this is democracy, what are we teaching them?" She asked a question no one had rehearsed the answer to. The question wasn't long, but it was powerful enough to make the entire room hold its breath. A soft murmur arose. The chairman smiled and said, "That's a lovely question, but children don't need to understand all of these things." But Taidy immediately retorted in a calmer voice, "If children don't need to understand, why do adults always have children stand for photos?" Then the entire room fell silent. Not a silence of politeness, but a silence where no one knew how to respond. For the first time in this meeting, no one had a voice anymore. After that day, there was no punishment, but no one invited Taidy to events anymore. The school didn't get more funding, but it wasn't cut either. Things didn't get better and they didn't get worse. It was stuck in the middle. It was like the whole town was watching to see what kind of person this child would grow up to be. Years passed. Taidy grew old enough to understand that the system didn't survive because of a few bad people, but because many good people chose to remain silent. She wrote an essay for her teacher. The topic was, "My voice is not a gift." The last sentence reads, "If we rely solely on others, we will cry silently later, because we once allowed them to speak for us, choose for us, and think for us, forgetting that the voice was ours." The city of promises remains. The signs are still changed. Promises are still distributed. But something is different. Only questions remain unanswered. Next time, to whom will we entrust our voice? Or will we hold it ourselves, even if it's heavy?